I feel like with the next-gen games, they really got good
trovato,
at
Doctor.
climbing. So, it took them a while.
Fratelli Auditori, why am I not surprised? You've made quite a mess of yourself, young man.
It's nothing, really.
Dude, why you gotta wear that fucking
You must
creepy
help him.
mask?
That pretty face is his only asset.
Thanks. Thanks, bro.
There we are. Now get out of here.
Grazie.
I don't know if that really
This way.
you need to go to a doctor for that. I mean, a little bit of a
Quite a night.
reaction.
Indeed.
200
Only wish they were
Florentines.
all as much fun. Oh, wait.
I could have bought like
They
5
are.
whores with that.
So, I'm generally a fan of the Assassin's Creed series, especially considering it's one of the best examples of historical fiction in video games. Game after game, the developers show time and time again their love for history, and the era each game is set in. In many ways, being in an Assassin's Creed game is like immersing yourself in a historical setting. Except for, a secret Assassin's Templar war going on over pieces of Eden, but whatever, you get the idea. But because of how ambitious Assassin's Creed games are in their historical nature, there are bound to be some liberties with history that might not be intentional. Recently, my friend Ultrox has been playing through the Assassin's Creed series and is currently on Assassin's Creed 2. It is Assassin's Creed 2 where a new kind of NPC is introduced, the Plague Doctor, who provides medical support for the player character, Ezio Auditore da Firenze. However, the scene I played in the beginning of the video is not historically accurate. In fact, pretty much everything regarding the Plague Doctors in Assassin's Creed 2 is not historically accurate. So, let's put on our historical nitpicking hats and take a look into some research regarding the beak-masked Plague Doctors. Beaked-masked Plague Doctors. There we go. First things first, we need to understand the origin of the Plague Doctor as they took on that appearance in relation to the time period of Assassin's Creed 2. The bulk of the historical side of the games takes place from 1476 CE to 1486 CE, right in the heart of Renaissance Italy. It's here where we can find our first issue because the iconic Plague Doctor costume wasn't invented until 1619, when the Renaissance period was pretty much over and done with. So, the Plague Doctors aren't even supposed to show up until a full 133 years after Assassin's Creed 2 ends. To put that into perspective, 133 years ago from when this video was made in 2018 was 1885, when the British Empire was the largest empire on Earth and Cuba was still under Spanish rule. The first Plague Doctor that had the iconic mask is closer to the beginning of Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag in 1715 than to Assassin's Creed 2. Now, Plague Doctors did exist before their famous costume was first used, but we'll get into the other inaccuracies later. So, who was the first Plague Doctor to don the iconic beak? That would be Charles Delorme, who was born in 1584 CE, 98 years after the end of Assassin's Creed 2. He was a Frenchman who studied medicine at the University of Montpellier? I don't know, I can't pronounce French. I'm going to say Montpellier for this point on out. I apologize to people who absolutely hate people who butcher the French language. But it was at the University of Montpellier where his father worked as a professor. The University of Montpellier, was a major medicinal institution at the time and made the miasma theory of disease really popular. Now, today we work with the germ theory, the idea that diseases and contagions come from germs. If you cough in someone's face, the bacteria or germs in your cough will be what contaminates the person you so rudely coughed at. But germ theory didn't really take off until the 1860s. Humanity as a species lived for over 1 million years without putting that together. Before germ theory, miasma theory was the main theory put into play. Miasma theory held the belief that people became sick due to the air being bad, and that diseases by nature traveled through the air. Miasma theory had generally been the main theory for disease in places like Europe and China for a long time, but it really gained popularity during the Black Death, when the plague exterminated many people throughout Europe from 1347 CE to 1351 CE. During that time, it was actually the University of Montpellier who promoted miasma theory. In his book called Black Death, Robert S. Gottfried, professor of history and director of medieval studies at Rutgers University, states, "Among the 14th century doctors who stressed the role of corrupt air were Ibn Khatima, Gentile of Foligno, the German physician John Hocker, and the medical faculty of the University of Montpellier, who hastily threw together a tractate lest their Parisian counterparts be accepted as the sole authority. The people of Montpellier believed that the deadly vapors came from the south. and they advised that doors and windows on houses be given northern exposures. It was believed that air was deadliest in the summer and early autumn, in fact the peak time for flea-borne and not airborne plague in most of northern Europe, because the hot weather opened the pores of the body, making individuals more susceptible to attack. This theory about open pores explains the general medical opposition to bathing and vigorous exercise during epidemics, and the varying vulnerability of individuals. So following in this legacy, Charles Delorme was a follower of the miasma theory as well. He graduated from Montpellier in 1607 after writing several theses, including Are the lives of kings, princes, and great men less exposed to disease and longer than common people and peasants? To put things into perspective, Delorme began to serve Queen Marie de' Medici of France, the great-great-great-granddaughter of Lorenzo de' Medici we see in Assassin's Creed 2.
He's running! Can I kill him? Get back here. Oh no, I'm killing civilians.
Delorme allegedly invented the now iconic plague doctor costume in Paris in 1619 to treat patients, filling the beak of the mask with different sorts of perfumes like straw, roses, spices, and anything that smelled nice. According to miasma theory, these aromatic scents would cancel out the bad air that would linger around plague patients. We can actually talk about the uniform of the plague doctor, which Assassin's Creed 2 generally gets right, though at the time plague doctors would not wear anything as outlandish as the costume they would be known for. Besides the beaked mask with the aromatic scents to counter bad air, which, by the way, didn't work, the overcoat was heavy and made out of waxed fabric, often leather. The mask would have glass eye coverings to protect the eyes, as well as gloves. The plague doctors would also often have a cane so they could give directions or touch the patients without any direct contact. Let's go back through that scene again one more time and break it down one by one.
I feel like with the next-gen games, they really got good at climbing. So, it took them a while.
Fratelli Auditori. Why am I not surprised?
Even though the Assassin's Creed games present the Auditore family as a prominent family, it would be unlikely that the plague doctor would recognize them on spot. First, who were plague doctors usually? Typically, plague doctors were either young and inexperienced doctors trying to get a name for themselves, or not-so-good doctors who might not even be qualified or certified. Why? Because nobody wanted to be a plague doctor. There were high possibilities that the plague doctor would die because of their understanding of the miasma theory. The CDC suggests that there are 3 ways to catch a plague, with only 2 of them really applying to the bubonic plague, which the Europeans were concerned with. Flea bites and contact with fluids were the primary cause of contagion for the bubonic plague, while the only way to get a plague that the miasma theory accounted for was the pneumonic plague, which was airborne. So again, nobody but the poor quality doctors and the inexperienced doctors became plague doctors. Most of the time, these doctors came from the countryside, or simply out of town. A prospecting plague doctor would go to a town, city, or village and meet with the town leaders and offer his services to the town when the town was already infected or in a time of epidemic, meaning they wouldn't just be littering the landscape all the time. Plague doctors were also hired specifically to stay away from the general population. In this clip and throughout Assassin's Creed 2, you'll find plague doctors just out in the open. Plague doctors were outsiders, and given the nature of their work, they would not intermingle willy-nilly with the general populace. Whenever the epidemic was over, they would typically leave the city and go find where the plague was prominent once more. The role we see the plague doctor play in Assassin's Creed 2 is more accurate to that of a normal doctor would do in the city. Back to the plague doctor offering his service, the town and the doctor would have a lot of bargaining, each trying to get the most out of the other as possible. The doctor would try to get as much of a salary as possible, as well as to have most of it paid up front, as he was likely to die anyway given his profession. The town government, who paid for the doctor's salary, wanted to be careful with their funds because, again, these doctors were probably of poor quality, and so you wanted to make sure you had a good doctor first. The town would also provide a home for the doctor to live in, usually for free or at a reduced rent. The general paid monthly salary of a plague doctor was about 30 florins, which was generally the net salary for living expenses, meaning the doctor didn't really get any surplus funds. However, it was still sort of a hefty sum. At the University of Pavia at the time, around 75% of the educated lecturers had an annual salary of less than 200 florins. So back to the scene. 1. The plague doctor did not wear this uniform in this time period. 2. The plague doctor would not be out and about with the public. 3. Unless the auditores were heavily infested with the plague, it wouldn't be likely that the doctor would recognize them.
You've made quite a mess of yourself, young man.
4. The plague doctor is taking a look at a minor wound. They would generally treat the plague. 5. This sort of minor wound wouldn't even likely be looked at by a doctor. With a wound like that, the main fear would be infection. The concept of infection actually never really gained traction until the mid-1500s, which would eventually lead to the discovery of germ theory, so again, the people at the time wouldn't even know what exactly an infection was or how it came about, to be worried about it in the first place. 6. The plague doctor is touching Ezio directly with his black glove, which would definitely put Ezio at risk for plague infection. Again, plague doctors typically used a cane to touch their patients when applicable, like here for example.
It's nothing, really.
Dude, why you gotta wear that fucking
You must
creepy
help him.
mask?
That pretty face is his only asset.
Thanks. Thanks, bro.
There we are. Now get out of here.
Grazie.
I don't know if that really
This way.
you need to go to a doctor for that.
Ultrox's reaction here would essentially be the same reaction as anyone else at the time. So hopefully we learned some things today. Now, of course, I know that it's just a game. The role of the doctor is just for game mechanic purposes. For example, you can pay a doctor to heal you and buy medicine from. While a plague doctor's equipment wouldn't really be for sale and treatment from the doctor would have been historically paid for by the town through the doctor's salary. Okay, I need to stop. This was a very experimental video, so I hope you enjoyed it. I'm thinking of doing more videos kind of in the veins of this regarding studies in the humanities. Check out Ultrox's channel. The links are in the description.